right, folks. Hello and welcome back to online English class. Hope you guys are doing well today. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, and today we're going to be beginning our work on OTN 6. Okay, so this says 7, but that's incorrect. Okay, so those are numbers from last year. It's actually OTN 6 for us. All right, and we're going to be working on part 2, chapters 9 through 10. Over the next couple days. Okay, so we'll be looking specifically at an SQ3R today. Should be a pretty brief class, all things considered. And then tomorrow we'll get into more extended analysis of the significance of Winston's engagement with the book, all right, Goldstein's text, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, that explains the party's theory and practice. And then finally, we'll analyze the significance of Winston and Julia's arrest by the thought police at the end of part 2. Okay, so before we do that, let's go ahead and look back at our top of the week announcements. Okay, so you need to remember your discussion grade procedures. Make sure that you are consistently leaving comments. Make sure that you are keeping up with your reading. All right, so throughout the course of this week, you need to be reading part 3, chapters 1 through 3 of 1984. Okay, you also need to send confirmation of your completion of OTNs 2, 3, and 4 by 3 p.m. on Wednesday of this week. That's tomorrow. Okay, so I need confirmation from everyone of OTNs 2, 3, and 4 being completed. Don't need pictures. I don't need you to send me the actual OTNs. All right, I just need an email that confirms the fact that you have completed them, that you have done them. Okay. Aside from that, make sure that you are continuing to complete your OTNs as we complete them in class, and make sure that you're working on your quarter 4 essay, which is going to be due anytime from May 18th to May 22nd. All right. So without any further ado, let's jump into our OTN 6. All right, in which we will first today be conducting an SQ3R for the text that is under consideration. Okay. So very simply, who is our speaker? Well, it continues to be the third-person omniscient narrative voice, all right, who understands and knows Winston's thoughts, who has read Winston's journal, and is privy to all of the emotions and experiences that Winston has had and is having throughout the course of his rebellion, okay? What is the genre of form? Well, as we have already said, it's a dystopian fiction or a piece of dystopia, okay? So up to this point, right, Winston has been rebelling against that dystopia, all right? In part 1, it's very clear that the dystopian world that Winston lives in seeks to control both his external and internal lives, okay? Very clearly, Winston's rebellion, first, is internal, all right, in part 1, as he attempts to sort of set himself free from the totalitarian control of the party. And then, just as the party attempts to control him both internally and externally, he then moves on after achieving some kind of internal control of himself to externalizing that internal freedom. All right, this is evident in 2 primary ways throughout the course of part 2 that we have already discussed and studied. First, his relationship with Julia. Began in the Golden Country, continued in Mr. Charrington's shop. It's an expression, right, of Winston and Julia's attempt to collectively, together, pursue a kind of blessed or good life based on their rightly ordered, sensible pleasures, all right, based on what they were made to do, who they were made to be. Okay, then this rebellion grows even more extensive in his relationship with O'Brien and the Brotherhood. That connects Winston to a group of people, a community, a kind of secret society of like-minded individuals who are actively opposed to the party's control and seek to rebuild a rational world together. Okay. So again, this is a kind of expression of Winston's instinctual desire as a human being to take his internal realities, his internal values, and begin to externalize them or express them in the world and get connected with communities, right? Groups of people who have those same values, all right? It's why people don't just worship God in their living rooms whenever Corona is not forcing them to go to church, on their computer, but rather they go to church, okay? People who value and love the gospel of Christ want to find themselves in communion, in brotherhood with other individuals who have that like-minded value system, right? Um, it's the same reason why you go to the Gator game, right? You go to watch the Florida Gators play all together in massive crowds of people who all have that similar value system. They all love the Florida Gators, okay? And there you are, all supporting them in communion with one another. That no one has to come and like tell you to do that, right? That's just something that instinctively human beings desire to do, to externalize their internal value systems, whether it be something very deeply serious like a belief in God, or something perhaps deeply serious for some individuals, but a little less weighty, like a love of the Florida Gators football team, okay? So this kind of comes to a head, or comes to an apex in the next phase of the narrative, in which Winston does something significant. He reads a forbidden book. And we'll talk about the significance of that reading. Why is it that reading in his own private space with Julia, okay, as they lounge together, as they enjoy one another's company and get connected to the brotherhood through reading this book, why is that so significant? Why is that the kind of apex of the rebellion? Or why does it lead to a kind of apex of the rebellion? We'll explore that some tomorrow, okay? So what's the title of this portion of text? Well, it's just part 2, chapters 9 and 10, okay? This is going to bring Winston to a kind of apex as he reads Emmanuel Goldstein's book and he applies it to the way that he views the world. We'll be talking about all of that in the future. But significantly, right, after that rebellion comes to an apex, okay? An apex is the highest point of a thing, okay? So that means the only place you can go is where? Down, all right? He is arrested. He and Julia's rebellion grows increasingly complex as the thought police comes and undermines the credibility of their rebellion by suggesting that they were in control of it from the very beginning. That raises a very important question that will be explored throughout the course of part 3. Okay, so the central question of our analysis, very simply, is how does the style of the narration develop the significance of Winston's rebellion against the party? Okay, let's quickly offer a recitation of what happens in chapters 9 and 10, and then we'll be done for the day. Okay, so it's a very short class today, and we'll be analyzing these pieces of text tomorrow. Okay, so stick with me here as we just simply recite and go over what happened in these sections of text. Okay, so Winston, chapter 9 begins after Winston has worked a 90-hour work week. Because during Hate Week, all right, this big celebration of both the party members' love of Big Brother and hatred of his enemies, it's like a week-long 5 minutes hate, right? Oceania announces that they have switched their alliance. They used to be at war with Eurasia, and now they're at war with East Asia. But, all right, they announce that they've always been at war with East Asia. And despite the fact that everyone ought to be able to remember very simply that 5 minutes ago we were talking about how terrible Eurasia is and talking about how we want to destroy them from the face of the earth because they're the worst. Everyone seems to automatically, exercising doublethink, realign themselves with the new reality that Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, and East Asia is the worst. And everything has to be rewritten in order to reflect the fact that Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. So every news article, every piece of history, every kind of record that there was that reflected the fact that Oceania was at war with Eurasia needs to be rewritten. So everyone in the records department, everyone in the Ministry of Truth has to realign the historical record to reflect the metaphysical reality controlled by the party that they have always been at war with East Asia. And everyone has to work excessively long hours in order to accomplish this feat. Okay? All right, after that, he returns from that insane labor, right? So think about how incredibly frustrating and insane that kind of work would be. Almost like you at school, whenever you don't understand why you're doing something, okay, or you don't believe that it's actually truly valuable, right? It drives you insane to have to like actually work really hard on this thing that you don't actually view the value of or understand the value of, right? So Winston, much in that same way, is sort of dehumanized by this work as he does not understand its telos and also understands that it is literally insane what he is doing. Okay, he returns from this insanity back into the kind of the world of the glass paperweight. All right, the world of his own, the sane world that he's building for himself, and he begins to read the book, which has been given to him clandestinely. All right, so the title of the book is, it's not just the book, it's called The Theory and the Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. Okay, an oligarchy is a government that is governed by a few wealthy, powerful individuals, and a collectivistic government is one in which the government owns or collectivizes all of the material in a society. Okay, so in other words, right off the bat, even the title of the book seems to suggest that Emmanuel Goldstein and the Brotherhood rebel against the totalitarian party, control of the party, by articulating what it is that the party is doing and how they are doing, thinking consciously about it, right? Instead of simply unconsciously submitting to the party's ostensible control of reality, right? They analyze that reality. They write books about that reality. They rebel against that reality, okay? One chapter explains the party slogan, "War is Peace," okay? And this is a lengthy chapter. It's written by Goldstein, and it's not really a story. It's meant to be like an expository essay analyzing a concept, right? Winston loves it. I love it. You might hate it, or you might love it, right? But it explains in great detail what exactly is meant by the phrase "war is peace" in a historical context, okay? This is the kind of thing that Winston's been longing for, this kind of rationalization of the party's practice that reflects what Winston's been writing in his own journal, but it expands on it. It connects him to a kind of intellectual tradition. Okay, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So it's explained in greater detail than ever before. He then moves on to read another chapter, chapter 1, titled "Ignorance is Strength," that explains the nature of the party's control over reason, okay, or the knowledge, okay, and that is ultimately, as described by Goldstein and understood by Winston, rooted in their control of records and history, and which is all conducted through the use of doublethink, okay. Now, Winston falls asleep after reading the two lengthy chapters. He wakes and once again hears the sort of beautiful singing of the red-armed prole woman outside the window. All right, he meditates on the significance of this song. He recognizes that the woman is not just a beautiful singer, but beautiful herself. Beautiful because of her engagement in the natural life cycle of a human being, which is inherently beautiful, inherently good, according to Winston. And after considering the sort of beauty of this common woman and the ways in which that beauty is common to all, okay, the property of all human beings, after considering these sort of transcendent realities about the human condition and the inherent beauty that is sort of on the human life, after this sort of climactic moment in which Winston reaches this understanding of life and humanity that makes all of his rebellion worth it and gives him hope for the future, he hears a voice from behind him say, "You are the dead." The voice has come from behind the picture of St. Clement's Dane Church. Okay, the picture falls off, and there is a telescreen that has been listening to them from the very beginning of their rebellion, throughout the course of their rebellion. The house is surrounded by agents of the thought police and other members of the Ministry of Love. And there enters Mr. Charrington. Okay, and Mr. Charrington, no longer disguised as an old Cockney man who runs a kind of second-hand shop or an antique shop, he now is sure, Winston is sure, that Mr. Charrington is an agent of the thought police, and that Mr. Charrington, by extension, has allowed and also encouraged Winston in his rebellion, tempted him with this rebellion in order to illustrate his deeper thought crimes, in order to arrest him and then send him to the ministry of love to be remade, to be recreated, to be rectified, to be redeemed according to the party's understanding of redemption. Okay, so that's what happens by the end of part 2. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about some of these concepts in a little more detail. We're going to unpack what Goldstein is writing about in the book, and we'll talk a little bit more about the circumstances and meaning of Winston's arrest. But today we just simply got a basic idea of what happened in this section of text, and that is all that we need to do for today. Now, it would be wise for you to spend some time thinking about your quarter 4 essay, which is due anytime from May 18th to May 22nd. All right. So after you make sure that you're up to date with your OTN, okay, and you get your notes up to date, after you do a little bit of reading in the text to make sure that you're keeping up with your weekly reading, I think it would be prudent of you to spend a little bit of time this evening thinking about your essay, right? Returning to that quarter 4 essay prompt and thinking about how you can articulate and establish a reasonable essay in response to that prompt. Okay, ultimately it's up to you, and I hope you have a great evening.